Witches, Dissenters and Heretics. The hidden side of Puritan Boston. Boston's Puritan founders envisioned a city upon a hill, a model of Christian virtue and unity. But beneath this ideal lay a society obsessed with conformity, enforced by law, theology, and social pressure. Those who resisted, whether as religious dissenters, outspoken women, or accused witches, faced harsh punishment. Yet, paradoxically, the very mechanisms of control and the intellectual ferment of Boston also sowed the seeds of dissent, activism, and, ultimately, revolution. This analysis explores how conformity was enforced, how resistors like Hutchinson were punished, and how Boston's unique blend of Puritan theology, civic activism, economic dynamism, and intellectual leadership shaped both repression and resistance. 1. The theological foundations of conformity, covenant theology, and the city upon a hill. At the heart of Puritan Boston was a powerful theological vision. The community was bound by a covenant with God, and its collective fate depended on strict obedience to divine law. The Puritans saw themselves as a new Israel, chosen to build a model society whose success or failure would be a public testament to their faithfulness. Covenant theology. The belief that the entire community was in a binding contract with God, requiring strict adherence to biblical law. Any deviation was seen as a threat to the community as standing before God, and could invite collective punishment. Calvinist predestination. The focus on visible signs of election, moral behavior, piety, conformity, led to a culture of surveillance and discipline. Authority of Scripture. The Bible was the supreme authority, interpreted literally, and used as the standard for all beliefs and behaviors. Church-state unity in Boston. Church and state were intertwined. Only church members could vote or hold office, and civil authorities were expected to enforce religious laws. The legal system was used to suppress heresy, blasphemy, and dissent to legal and social mechanisms of enforcement, theocratic legislation, and surveillance. Mandatory church attendance. Absence from church was punishable by fines or even whipping. Constables searched for absentees and forcibly brought them to services. Community surveillance. Neighbors were expected to report deviations from Puritan norms. Tithing men were appointed to monitor the private affairs of their neighbors. Censorship. Only Puritan beliefs were tolerated. Dissenting speech was suppressed, and repeat offenders faced banishment, mutilation, or execution punishments for nonconformity. Fines, whipping, and stocks. Minor offenses, for example, missing church, Sabbath breaking, were punished by fines, public whipping, or time in the stocks. Banishment. The ultimate punishment for dissenters like Hutchinson and Roger Williams was expulsion from the colony, mutilation, and execution. Persistent dissenters, especially Quakers, could face ear cropping or hanging. Seizure of children. Parents deemed unfit to provide proper Puritan education could have their children removed and apprenticed elsewhere. The Salem witch trials. Conformity and hysteria. The infamous Salem witch trials 1692–93 were a direct outgrowth of Boston's culture of conformity. Accusations of witchcraft were used to target those, especially women, who deviated from social or religious norms. The trials reflected the same anxieties about dissent and disorder that drove the persecution of heretics and dissenters. In Boston 3, The Fate of Dissenters. Anne Hutchinson and others. Anne Hutchinson, the archetype of punished dissent. Beliefs. Hutchinson argued for salvation by grace alone, and claimed direct revelation from God, challenging both the clergy's authority and gender norms. Trial. She was charged with heresy, sedition, and gender transgression. Despite her articulate defense, her claim of direct revelation sealed her fate. Punishment. Hutchinson was banished from the colony and excommunicated from the Boston Church. Her followers were also expelled. Other notable dissenters. Roger Williams, banished for advocating separation of church and state and fair treatment of Native Americans, founded Rhode Island as a haven for religious freedom. Quakers, imprisoned, whipped, banished, and, in some cases, executed for defying Puritan religious authority. Mary Dyer, a former supporter of Hutchinson, was hanged for repeatedly returning to protest. Quaker persecution. Baptists and others, fined, banished, or physically punished for rejecting Puritan doctrines. Gender and dissent. Women who dissented were seen as doubly threatening, not only for their religious views but for challenging gender norms. The cases of Anne Hutchinson and Mary Dyer illustrate how women who spoke publicly or led religious gatherings faced especially harsh penalties. For the role of witchcraft accusations. Witchcraft as a tool of social control, targeting women and outsiders. The majority of those accused of witchcraft in New England were women, often those who were outspoken, independent, or marginalized. Theological justification. Puritan ministers, including Boston's increase in cotton mather, warned of the devil's influence and the need for vigilance against spiritual threats, legal mechanisms. Witchcraft was a capital crime, and the courts used spectral evidence and community testimony to convict the accused. The Salem witch trials in Boston. While the trials occurred in Salem, their roots lay in the culture of conformity and fear of dissent that Boston exemplified. The trials were a manifestation of the same impulse to suppress nonconformity and maintain social order. 5. The paradox of conformity. Seeds of dissent and resistance. Civic activism and participatory governance. Town meetings. Boston's system of participatory governance town meetings fostered debate, consensus building, and a sense of civic responsibility. These forums became incubators for later activism and resistance. 3e. Defense of charter rights. Bostonians led revolts against external authority, for example, the Dominion of New England, asserting local rights and self-government. Economic dynamism and the merchant class. Booming commerce. Boston's economic success created a wealthy merchant class, some of whom, like John Hull and Peter Faneuil, used their influence to support both religious and civic projects from meetinghouses to marketplaces. Tensions. As commerce flourished, some Puritan leaders worried about declining religious observance, but the merchant class often pushed for greater autonomy and tolerance. Intellectual leadership in Harvard's graduates. Harvard College, founded to train a learned ministry, Harvard quickly became the training ground for the colony's elite. Its graduates dominated both the pulpit and the halls of power, shaping Boston's laws, institutions, and intellectual life. Harvard's early graduates. Spread of new ideas. Over time, Harvard's curriculum expanded to include Enlightenment thought, fostering a spirit of inquiry and skepticism toward traditional authority. Many revolutionary leaders, for example, John Adams, Samuel Adams, were Harvard alumni. Harvard's early graduates. The irony of suppression. The very mechanisms designed to enforce conformity, rigorous education, participatory governance, and civic engagement also created the conditions for dissent, debate, and, eventually, revolution. Boston's culture of surveillance and discipline produced both repression and resilience. As dissenters found new ways to challenge authority and assert their rights. Rebellion roots. 6. Comparison with other colonies. Boston's intolerance was exceptional even by colonial standards. While other colonials like Connecticut and New Haven enforced religious conformity, none matched Boston's severity. In contrast, Rhode Island and Pennsylvania became havens for dissenters, explicitly protecting freedom of conscience. Rhode Island, Pennsylvania. 7. The enduring legacy. Boston's hidden side. The persecution of witches, dissenters, and heretics reveals the dark underbelly of the city upon a hill. Yet, the same forces that enforced conformity also fostered a culture of activism, debate, and resistance. The legacy of Hutchinson, Roger Williams, Mary Dyer, and countless others is a testament to the enduring tension between unity and liberty, order and dissenter, tension that would ultimately shape the American Revolution and the nation's ongoing struggle with the meaning of freedom. In summary, conformity in Puritan Boston was enforced through a powerful blend of theology, law, and social pressure, with harsh punishments for those who resisted. Yet, the city's intellectual and civic life, economic dynamism, and the very mechanisms of control also nurtured a spirit of dissent and activism. The stories of witches, dissenters, and heretics are not just tales of repression, they are the roots of Boston's and America's culture of resistance and reform.